Real leadership isn't tested when everything's running smoothly. The true test comes in those tough moments, right? When a difficult conversation has to happen, or you've got to make a decision that you know is going to be unpopular. So if you're a leader trying to figure out how to handle those moments without compromising your values, this is for you. Because taking the easy way out, avoiding that conflict, that's not strength. It's actually a massive failure of leadership.
Okay, let's kick this off with a really powerful idea from organizational consultant Patrick Lencioni. I mean, just listen to that. He paints this incredible picture of a team in perfect sync, just totally aligned and practically unstoppable. It sounds amazing, right? It's the dream.
But if that's the dream, then we've got to ask ourselves, why is it so ridiculously rare? Why do so few teams or companies ever actually get there? What is the disconnect between that perfect ideal and the reality that most of us are living in every day at work?
Well, the gap is it's staggering. A PwC study looked at more than 10,000 projects, and what they found was that less than 3% were successfully completed. I mean, think about that. That is an absolutely massive failure rate. It points to something deeply, systemically broken in how teams actually work together.
And here's the thing. This breakdown doesn't usually start with bad intentions. It often starts with a leader just trying to keep the peace, But that very desire to avoid any kind of friction, that can actually start a downward spiral into complete and total dysfunction. So let's walk through how this happens, using Lencioni's framework to guide us.
So this pyramid here, it visualizes the entire collapse perfectly. And you'll notice it's not 5 random problems. No, it's a chain reaction. One thing causes the next, which causes the next, and the whole thing comes crashing down because of one single foundational failure right at the very bottom.
It all starts right here, with an absence of trust. See, when people on a team don't feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to admit they messed up, to ask for help, or to throw out a crazy idea, they build walls. The whole environment gets defensive, and everyone's number one priority becomes protecting themselves, not working together.
And of course, that lack of trust leads directly to the next problem, a fear of conflict. People start avoiding passionate debate, not because they don't care about the ideas, but because they're afraid it's going to get personal. And what you're left with is this fake peace, this artificial harmony, where everyone's smiling and nodding, but the most important, mission-critical conversations are never, ever happening.
And from there, the whole thing just picks up speed. Without that healthy debate, people don't really buy into decisions they never even got to weigh in on. And with no real commitment, they're sure not going to hold each other accountable for behaviors that are dragging the team down. And what happens then? Well, with no accountability, everyone's individual needs, their ego, their career, their comfort, it all becomes more important than the team winning. And just like that, the mission fails.
So we can see all the symptoms of this dysfunction, right? But what's the actual root cause? This isn't just about a manager needing a new technique or a better process. No, this goes so much deeper. It's a failure of leadership character.
The source material calls this defensive decision-making, or to use the more common slang, it's a cover-your-ass culture. It's a coping mechanism where people stop asking, what's the best decision for the organization, and they start asking, what's the decision that's safest for me? What will protect me from getting blamed if things go wrong?
And this isn't just some abstract theory. This has catastrophic, real-world consequences. Just look at the Wells Fargo scandal. You had thousands of employees creating millions of fake accounts, all because they were under insane pressure in a culture of fear. And the leadership? They avoided confronting the fact that their core strategy was deeply unethical. Because, hey, the numbers look good in the short term. That CYA culture led directly to a disaster that cost them over $3 billion and absolutely shattered public trust. So you've got these two paths staring you in the face. On one side, you've got the spiral into dysfunction. On the other, the path to trust and high performance. The multi-billion-dollar question for any leader is, how do you get your team from that side to this one? How do you actually build a team that works? The answer isn't some new management fad or a 5-step checklist you can download. It's about activating what the research calls a leader's moral compass. Think of it as your internal guidance system, your principles, your values that give you the strength to choose the harder path, because you know it's the better path.
So the journey starts inward. It begins with authentic leadership. This basically just means knowing who you are and what you really stand for, your non-negotiables. It's about acting based on that internal compass, not just whatever external pressures are coming your way, and being transparent with your team about it.
But here's the catch. Being true to yourself isn't enough. Your team has to see it.
That's where behavioral integrity comes in. It's the gap, or hopefully the alignment, between what you say and what you do. It's the classic walk the talk. And honestly, it's the only currency that actually builds real trust. When your team sees that consistency day in and day out, they start to believe. And finally, you need the engine that turns those values into real action, moral courage. This is the guts, right? This is the strength to do the right thing even when it's really, really uncomfortable. When you might get criticized, when you're risking your reputation, when you have to confront someone powerful. It's the willingness to create that principled friction because you know it's what's best for the mission.
Now, when a leader can bring these three things together, authenticity, integrity, and courage, that's when things start to change. They can literally begin the climb out of that dysfunctional pit and kickstart a powerful positive chain reaction that builds a truly high-performing team.
What you get is a virtuous cycle, the polar opposite of that dysfunction pyramid. The leader's integrity builds the foundation of trust. That trust then allows for healthy conflict around ideas. That healthy conflict forges real commitment. That commitment creates a culture of peer-to-peer accountability. And that accountability is what drives incredible, collective results.
And listen, this isn't just a feel-good theory. This model is from a study out of Cornell University, and it shows the exact causal chain. It literally maps out how a leader's character has a direct, measurable impact on their team's performance.
And here is the single most important finding from the research. A leader's authenticity, their internal values and self-awareness, wasn't enough by itself. It only started building commitment from their team when it was proven through their behavioral integrity. Let me say that again. Your team has to see your words and actions line up before they'll truly buy in. Talk is cheap. So this brings us to the core takeaway of this whole thing. For so long, we've been taught to smooth things over, to reduce tension, to avoid conflict. But great leadership isn't about creating a friction-free zone. It's about creating the right kind of friction. I want to leave you with this one powerful idea that just flips conventional wisdom on its head. The source material says the absence of tension is not always a sign of alignment. Sometimes it is a sign that leadership is not being exercised. Wow. In other words, if everything is always calm and quiet, it might just mean you're not leading. True leadership requires creating principled friction.
So, let's make this personal. Let's bring it right back to you. I want you to reflect on this one question. Based on everything we just talked about, what is the one necessary, productive, and principled conversation that you are avoiding right now? If you want to go deeper into this, I've linked the notebook below where I break this down further and connect it to real leadership application.